No mai haere mai ki tēnei piso koro, tēnei kauhau, i tēnei rā kei konei Amazing Ngawhika, kua whakaritia kia ia ki te kōrero I pāna ki tētahi rauemi hau, o Toi Tangata e ki ana ko te Distance Nutrition Support Service. No reira, no mai haere mai. Kia ora, welcome to this Toi Portal webinar. This is another opportunity for us here at Toi Tangata to share what we're doing, actually. We often try and connect up with a few different dynamic people, and this time it just happens to be an in-house character. So welcome. Without further ado, I will introduce Amazing Ngawhika. Kia ora.
Koe anō, tēnā koutou katoa. E te tī, e te tā, e aku nui, aku rahi, tēnei tēnei atu kia koutou, e whakarongo mai nei, ki āhau. He mihi mata kui kia koutou, aha koa mo te tai tukarau, te tai tonga, te tai hauauru, me te tai rāwhiti. Ki te puku o te ika puta no I te moana nui ākiwa, tēnā koutou, hono tēnā tātou katoa. Ko tōku ingoa ko Amazing Ngawhika, he uri tēnei o te arawa waka, he uri hoki o mai tahu iwi whānui, e mihi atu nei ki a koutou katoa. Thank you everybody for tuning in today. As I said, my name is Amazing Ngawhika. I have been associated with Toi Tangata and in its original form, Te Hotu Manawa Māori, probably for about 6 years now. Mostly in a part-time role, but I've had a long association with this whānau here. Today I'm going to talk to you about our Distance Nutrition Support Service that we've just started to implement, and I'm going to talk about why we have decided to go onto this pathway and also what we need to do to get it going. But I thought rather than just go straight into the nutrition support service, I'll just give you a little bit of a background into the journey that has led us to this point. So once again, thanks very much for tuning in, and without any further ado, we'll get into it. So, kia ora tātou. Push the button. See how I do it.
You should be able to. Oh, push on it, yeah? Yes.
Kia ora tātou. So, nutrition. There are many different definitions for what nutrition is, and I thought I would start off with what nutrition is based on what the scientific definition is. So one of the definitions is that nutrition is the process of providing or obtaining the food necessary for health and growth. So basically we need good food to allow us to function normally and to allow for growth and repair as well. So whether you are a plant, tree, ant or elephant, every living organism in the world needs a form of energy to be able to do whatever that species needs to do. Plus they need the raw materials, the raw ingredients to help maintain and build that organism. So that's pretty much what binds us all together. If you do not need energy and if you do not need nutrients, then you're probably not a living creature. You're a rock, you're a molecule. So all living creatures need some type of energy, some type of nutrient, and for us, organisms such as mammals, as such, we call that food. But nutrition is also a branch of science that deals with nutrients and nutrition, particularly in human. So often when we take nutrition at university, it comes under a branch called human nutrition. And that's what we focus, 99% on is the nutrition of humans. I'm sure other branches such as dealing with animals and such might look at what they need in terms of nutrition, but we focus on human nutrition. Another definition is the process of taking in food and using it for growth, metabolism and repair, nutritional stages are ingestion, that's the food pretty much going into your mouth, digestion, the breaking down of that food, absorption. Once that food is broken up into smaller units, it's then transported around the body, which is the transport that you see there. Assimilation is when it is taken up by the cells in the body, whether it's the nutrients or the energy, and then finally the excretion, where there is nutrients and waste products surplus to requirements, and somehow that needs to leave the body. But we don't need to go there today. So that's a nutrition definition. I'll go back to it. Having been in the nutrition world for easily over 10 years, probably a little more, I've been thinking about these things for quite a while now, and I'm starting to come up with my own definition of what good nutrition is. And for me, one of the definitions is the aspiration for people to receive somewhere between adequate amounts of nutrients and optimal amounts of nutrients. Somewhere. So if you have a diet that is adequate, then generally you will be in good health. I mean, basically that's the bare minimum requirements that you need. But most of us will live somewhere between adequate, and then sometimes we'll drop to deficient on some days, but you'd hope that on most days that you'd be adequate. And then there's the range that's called optimal. So optimal is the perfect amount of nutrition and nutrients that somebody needs for a day. What adequate and optimum is for every individual does vary depending on a number of things, one being the age. So obviously nutritional requirements for a baby is quite a lot different than for a toddler, then for a growing child, then for an adolescent, then for an adult, then for a pregnant woman, a lactating woman, an older adult, elderly, and such. So these things change over time depending on what stage of development you are. And of course, it also depends on how active you are. Nutrition for, say, an Olympic athlete is quite a lot different than some of us ordinary people who just go to work every single day. I just remember seeing what Phelps' diet was, and he has something in the order of 50,000 kilojoules a day. You know, that's just unbelievable. But that's what he requires to be able to feed the massive amounts of activity he does, to encourage the repair of his body, because you know all athletes hammer their body, so you know they have higher requirements of most vitamins, most minerals, most protein and such. If people get below adequate levels of nutrition, we often start talking about this thing known as deficiency. And this is a place that you can be on every now and then, but when people find themselves in the deficiency category too long, they actually get quite sick. And this is especially seen in the developing countries, you know, vitamin deficiencies, calcium deficiencies and such. But worryingly enough, we are seeing deficiencies even in places like Aotearoa, New Zealand. So let's not get too complacent in that area. If you have more than optimal amounts of nutrition, at some stage, it's not necessarily a bad thing. We would probably just call that wasteful. You're having much more nutrients than you actually require. But if you do have too many of certain nutrients, such as vitamin A, vitamin D, and such, you do get into the area known as toxicity. So that's another thing that's worth noting. But for me personally, one of your definitions of good nutrition is to have somewhere between adequate and optimal nutrients. Secondly, is the ability to procure the appropriate energy requirements for people's aspirations. So this is similar to what I was talking about in terms of nutrients. we need the correct amount of energy. Energy comes in three forms of our food, or four, sorry. So either through carbohydrates, which include sugar, fiber, simple carbohydrates and complex carbohydrates. Secondly, we get it through protein, which are made up of millions and millions of different amino acids joined together. And thirdly, we get energy from fats. And there's also another macronutrient that we get energy out of, and it's called alcohol. So there's only four things that we can currently get energy from. Big problem of the world is people are having far more energy than they require, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but if you have too much every single day, what will happen is that your excess generally, not always, will get turned fat, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a great evolutionary process that if you eat more than you need, your body will store it for a time that you may need it during times of scarce food. So that's a great thing. But in developed countries like New Zealand, we don't really have a scarcity of food, and then we get much more energy required. Now there comes a time where as you start building up fat, especially around the abdominal region, your body stops operating with efficiency. Something happens where the organs don't function with efficiency, both at a metabolic level, both at a hormonal level, and also even physically. When there's so much fat in that area, it's actually creating stress on the organs surrounding it. And so people start getting sick. And one of the main sicknesses that we talk to that obesity causes is type 2 diabetes, but we'll speak about that later. So having too much energy than we require is a bad thing. As I said, there's a lot of variation. Athletes need heaps more because they're a machine that requires more. Less active people need less. Bigger people need more. Smaller people need less. Babies don't require a lot of energy per se, but for their size, they require quite a lot. I've got a 3-month-old child. She's feeding every 2-3 hours. She's only a tiny little thing. She must only weigh about 6 kilograms, maybe 10, I don't know. But for her size, she eats quite a lot more food when compared to an adult, but just in actual amounts, it's quite small. But they need food to power that massive development that's going on, both in growth, both in brain growth, brain development, and those sort of things. Other countries, it's about getting not enough energy, and then when you see, those famines going on, and you see people looking really, really skinny and very, very sick, that's because they're not getting enough food, they're not getting enough energy. So just to reiterate, we need somewhere between the adequate and optimal amount of nutrients to perform and function throughout the day, and we need the appropriate amount of energy from our foods, and what that appropriate amount is depends on our stage of development and how active we are. And finally, there needs to be another aspect besides the scientific aspect, and I believe that the foods that we consume need to be consistent with things such as manaki whenua, manaki wai, manaki hou, and manaki tinana. So it's basically foods that we eat need to be consistent with our environment. And I say this because if you were to look at the breakdown of every part of our body, of our muscles, our bones, our skin, our hair even, you would notice that most of those ingredients actually come from the land. So whatever we do to the land, we do to ourselves. That soil, that first 3-4 inches of soil, topsoil, what we call paraone, that is basically the raw ingredients to make a human being, to make any other living creature actually. Water, we are made up of somewhere between 70 and 80% water by weight. I know in New Zealand it's a big topic right now that the degradation of our waterways is happening at an alarming rate, and even if we stop dairy right now, it'll get a lot worse before it got a lot better as those contaminants leach its way to our waterways. So it's a really, really worrying thing. Same as the kaupapa whenua, what we do to the water, we do to ourselves. This glass of water right here that I'm drinking, luckily we're privileged enough to have a filtering system here, but if that water is contaminated, we all get it as we drink it. And even the air that we breathe, we think that we're different from the air, but we're actually made of the air as well. I mean, the largest component of air is nitrogen. Nitrogen is the main component of protein, and protein is the main component of our muscles, of our bones, of our connective tissue, of our cells. So, you know, we are made of the earth, we are made of the water, we are made of the air. So we need to ensure that our nutrition is consistent with our ability to take care of the environment. So thank you for listening to that very long spiel. Oh, I'll just go back. So the tikanga Toi Tangata is like whenever we have any kōrero, we like to go back to, you know, our origins, e ai ki ngā kōrero a o tātou tūpuna. So one of the things is, I'm sure most of you already know, but we do have a whakapapa of kai. And one of our, I guess, things that we're trying to encourage is that we know the whakapapa of our food. If the food that we eat has been so processed and so manipulated and it's difficult to know where that food comes from, then we don't really understand the genealogy of that food, which means that that food, not always, but in many instances, is not good for us. So that's one of the things we encourage from one of our kaupapa called Kai Māori, Kai Ora, is that we should try and re-establish that relationship, that natural relationship that us as human beings have with our food. These days in this industrial era with supermarkets and stuff, there's a real disconnect between our food and us. So it's one of the things we want to encourage is that, you know, when you grow your own food, that there's that connection there. You were there at the inception of the seeds, of the seedlings. You were there to see it grow. You were there to harness it. You were there to make it flourish. And then at the end of it, you were there to receive the bounty of your hard work, or someone else's hard work. But at the moment, we are quite disconnected to kai, and it's just turned into a real industrial animal. We're producing kai on a really industrial level, and we just want to bring it back to what is natural. The origins of kai for us is happened back in Te Ao Kohatu. It started with Te Tohenga, where the gods were not very happy about living in that cramped condition between Rangi and Papa, and they began to debate about what they were going to do. In the end, they decided that they were going to split their parents, known as Te Wehenga, ko Rangi nui e tuake nei, ko Papa Tunuku e takoto iho nei. And then not all of the brothers agreed with Te Wehenga, and so pakanga, or a great battle called Te Pairangi, ensued, in which all the gods went to battle, which is captured in this image on the PowerPoint. This is actually from Kiwa Productions. Big plug for Kiwa. If you go to the Apple bookstore, they have 4 stories about the origins of Te Ao Māori, and the first book is actually free, and it's really an amazing visual animated book, so if you get into that. So the pakanga happened, and it was Tāwhiri Mātea that went around and defeating all his brothers. Then he faced Tū Mātauinga finally, lastly, but he was unable to defeat Tuma Tauinga. Tuma Tauinga called out to his brothers to help out. They didn't, and so he then decided to get revenge on his other brothers, and in doing so, he got revenge on Tane, and from there he consumed his descendants, which were the birds of the forest and other creatures of the forest. He attacked Haumia and Rongo, and that's where we get our cultivated foods and our uncultivated foods. He also attacked Tangaroa, and then from there we get our foods from both Tangaroa Kiuta, which is the freshwater Tangaroa, and Tangaroa Kitai, which is the sea, the salt, the sea-based food. So that is our origins of food. Before he could eat those foods, he needed to be able to debase their tapu, and he did this through karakia. He needed to placate or to not anger the gods, so he needed to do a karakia. And so karakia, even though most of us do Christian karakia these days, it comes from a time where it was to acknowledge from whence the kai that was laid before you come from, acknowledge its mana, and to placate its tapu. Kia ora. Anyway, so what's time? 23, right? Better get going. Okay, so one of the reasons why we decided that we needed to do something different than we're currently doing is that there's quite a lot of nutrition issues out there, as you know, a lot of health issues, long-term conditions, illnesses and such. But there are also some many issues with nutrition. One of the things is changing messages. I remember back in the 90s where everyone was told to watch the amount of cholesterol they were eating, and then everyone went on low cholesterol diets, and then later on we found out that it wasn't cholesterol that was bad for us, it was that your body made cholesterol, you know, so this sort of thing. I noticed that infant recommendations have changed over the years. I remember when I was first starting out that we were told to keep peanuts or peanut products away from children, and now we're like, well, actually we need to expose them early, otherwise they might more likely have allergies. The saturated fat thing was then identified as one of the big causes of heart disease, and now we're worrying, well, is it saturated fat? And it's possibly the combination of saturated fat and low quality carbohydrates, which is the killer. And then of course we're still debating over how bad really is sodium. One time, a few years, maybe 5 years ago, it was sort of like, oh, it wasn't too bad, it's only for salt sensitive people. And then it's, oh, maybe it's as bad as we thought. So there's quite a lot of confusion, which isn't helped that some of the science keeps changing. And so people are confused. Another issue of nutrition is the cost of healthy food. Food in New Zealand, one of the most expensive places to live in the world. And food, we've got a great food basket of a country here. People pay more for our foods here than they do in Great Britain. You know, these sorts of issues. Although I still believe you can eat healthy on a lower budget, but I totally agree that it won't taste as good from a lot of people's perspectives, and it takes a lot more work than just buying unhealthy food. There's a lot of fad diets, extreme diets, different diets. No one knows what's going on. There's a lot of confusion. There's availability of unhealthy food on every street corner. It's pretty difficult to buy pre-cooked meals for under $5. I feel like the government have, not just this government, but previous governments have dropped the ball in terms of their vision to recognise that obesity and obesity-related issues is going to be huge. They're only probably really recognising the massive impact that obesity will have on our country. Dietetic assistance. If you currently need dietetic assistance right now, you need to be suffering from between 2 and 3 chronic conditions. So you pretty much have to be really sick before you get any help right now. Here's a couple of stats for New Zealand. 2 in 3 people, adults in New Zealand, are overweight and obese. New Zealand is currently number 3 on the OECD rankings in terms of obesity. Obesity is unevenly distributed. A third of all New Zealanders, as we said, are obese. Nearly half are Māori and nearly 2/3 are Pacifica. So half of Māori, what I mean, are obese and 2/3 of Pacifica are. And you're 1.5 to 2 times more likely to be obese if you live from deprived areas. Nothing surprising there. So currently, in 2012, it was about $660 million to look after obesity-related issues. Now it's going to be $1 billion a year, they reckon. And I will talk about in DNA soon, but people don't attend their appointments. But if you can get someone to if someone is obese, if you can get them to drop just 5% of their weight, that can decrease their risks of diabetes by almost 50%. So, everyone's talking about dropping 10, 20 Ks and such, and, the biggest loser and stuff like that. But the actual fact, if you can just get someone to drop 5 kilograms, aesthetically, they might not reach where they want to be, but in terms of what that does to their health, it is hugely significant. Okay, so this is just to prompt me to show you a PDF and how to do that. Present view.
No, so if you go back here, like in the stop share.
Stop share.
Yeah, and then if you go to share again, and then share the PDF. Yeah.
Double click.
Share screen.
Okay, so these are all reasons why we wanted to start our nutrition support service. Here's some Māori stats that 170,000 Māori. When we get stats, they're always quite old because it takes almost 5 years to be able to delve into a whole bunch of different sources to be able to deliver this. So we're still working back to 2012. Here's one thing that I thought was really important, that for dietitians, when a Māori is quite sick and they're supposed to go see a dietitian, almost half of them never actually show up. And the DNA stands for do not attend. And then, as you can see, for all services, nearly, I don't know, that's a good chunk. There's probably about one fifth of Māori don't turn up to the other services. And so when we went through the DHB annual reports, we worked out that approximately $9 million is wasted in the health system just from Māori not attending. And I believe Pacific rates are even higher. So if you can come up with something which helps minimize that DNA rate, which we want to do, is you could save the system $9 million. We could work with just 1/10 of that amount of money and then offer distance nutrition support service to these people. And as you know, being online, they don't have to actually get there. They can do it from their house as long as they have internet access, of course. As you can see, obesity rates just growing. Obesity cost to New Zealand, that's 623 million. That's in 2006. They reckon it's 1 billion now. And yeah, the costs for treating people with diabetes does vary, but one of the most costly is if you need when your kidneys don't work anymore and you need dialysis. That's hugely, that costs the health system, I think it was about $60,000 a year. Anyway. Screen share. Cool. Okay. Yeah, so as I said, if you want nutrition help right now, you have to be suffering between 2 and 3 chronic conditions. Whoops. So you're pretty much already sick. So if you're talking about the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, there's a real example there. We have high DNA rates, do not attend. If you go into a doctor right now, and they'll generally, you'll go take some blood tests, and then you come back, and if you're good, they'll say great. If you're in this pre-diabetic state, they'll say you need to do more physical activity and eat better and lose some weight. And that's the extent of your consultation, and then you're left to your own devices. If you're if you've got really high levels, you might be prescribed some medication, but given that same advice, and it's only when you're really, really sick. New Zealand is a great place to look after you when you're really, really sick. But if you're not quite sick, there's nothing there for you. So this is one of the reasons that we started the nutrition support service, is that we want to create a service for those who are in the pre-diabetic state. And they reckon there is about 1 in 4 adults are pre-diabetic. And the likelihood of them going on to diet, having full-blown diabetes is quite high. So it makes a lot of sense that if you put in an intervention for that pre-diabetic area, you can help prevent a number of people to go on to diabetes. When someone is pre-diabetic, it can be a simple process to bring them back into those normal states of glucose. I won't be talking about this, but yeah, 1/4 of all adults are pre-diabetic at this stage. About there are currently 250,000 people in New Zealand have already been diagnosed, and who knows how many hundreds of thousands of people have been undiagnosed. So, you know, things aren't going to get any better unless we do something different. Currently, if you are pre-diabetic, there's nothing there for you. Unless you do have a reasonable amount of money, then you can go hire a dietitian or a nutritionist, somewhere generally in the range of $80 all the way up to $120 an hour. So there is a huge need, there is a huge demand for nutrition at the moment. We know this because when we're always out in the communities, we're always being asked if we can help this, help that. Can you please write me a nutrition plan? Can you write me a food plan? There's also quite a glut of dietitians out there. Otago University once held the monopoly on dietitians, and so every year there's like 30 new dietitians. But now other universities have it, so there's probably about 100 new dietitians every year. We had some people come do their student internship here last intake, and I believe straight after they finished, only 3 of them of the whole class got a job. So there's a lot of dietitians out there that need some work, and there's a lot of people out there that need some nutrition support. We will be using an online communication tool called Zoom. You don't need any specialty from the customer's perspective. From the client's perspective, you don't need any special technology. You can even do it from your phone. Zoom is probably one of the better conference tools out there, so that's what we do our nutrition support service through. There's no need for travel. You just do it from your work, do it from your home. You can even do it from your car. You can do it through your mobile if you've got enough data. It's really convenient because you give a time that suits. We use this online booking system that suits both the dietitian and will suit both the client. You book a time, low overhead, so we don't need people, we don't have a place to house dietitians, we don't need to do a big setup cost, we don't need to put in infrastructure, so we can literally just go ahead and do it. And we've also got some nutrition software that we purchased that can, what it can do is we can tailor a food plan specifically for our clients. When we were doing the testing phase, we were using the nutrition software, but what we found is that because I'm constantly being asked to write someone out a food plan, but what people don't realize is writing out a food plan is quite an onerous task. It takes quite a while. You've got to go through it. But with this nutrition software, it gives you a template, and then you just modify it based on the needs and the goals of the client. But what we found is that most people who need help shouldn't be following a direct food plan. They just need some advice, they just need some support. So we then pivoted to, we're using the nutrition software for really motivated people who already know about how to eat well and they just want to follow a strict food plan. And also we've used it for athletes or people who are in endurance events, intermittent sports like rugby, soccer, basketball, and high performance or just serious athletes. That's what a nutrition software we're using for, and just really motivate people. And just to show you so that nutrition, so you can access what to eat from your phone or from your web browser. Here's an example of someone's breakfast, someone's snack. So all you do is you just follow that. You enter in the type of activity you did as well. Your dietitian can monitor how you're going. So you download the app and then you put in your name and you just follow what to eat every day. So it's a 7-day food plan. You just generally just follow that for 4 weeks. And if you want to consult with your dietitian further, they can make some further modifications. Or if you're changing your training, if you're tapering or if you're increasing your activity, then you need to modify your diet as well. So summary, so we are providing a service for a growing demand. One of our huge aspirational goals is that we want to reduce the instances of type 2 diabetes. We want to prevent people from getting diabetes, and for those who currently have diabetes, we want to implement something that helps them to manage their diabetes. For people who are pre-diabetic, bringing them back to normal glucose ranges as if nothing had ever happened. For people who currently do have type 2 diabetes, if you manage to manage it and if you take your medication, sometimes it's like nothing's ever happened as well. Like if you manage it, if you get diagnosed early enough and you follow the lifestyle plans and taking your medication that's supposed to, normal life. To provide services to health providers. And another thing that we want to do is once we start getting more experience at this, is that we would like to offer the service to other health providers out there, health providers who have a lot of clients who need nutrition help. Perhaps we can help you there by subcontracting or whatever we can talk about the relationship we have, but we'll be able to look after your clients as well. Wea no, tēnei te mihi atu kia koutou katoa, e whakarongo mai nei ki taku nei reo aroa i tēnei o nā ata, e mihi kauake ana kia koutou katoa, mahi ana mahi kia hāpai nei i tō tātou iwi a hako ko wai a hako nuhia, tūturu o whiti whakamaua kia tēnā, haumi e hui e, tai e, kia ora tātou.